My name is Carol Adams, and I'm 60 years old. After my husband Tom passed away 5 years ago, I've been living alone in a small apartment in New York City. It's not much, but it's mine. I've spent the last few decades raising my kids, working as a nurse, and trying to make a living. But ever since Tom's passing, it's like everything changed. I felt like I was becoming invisible to my own family. I've been there for my children, Eric and Jessica, through thick and thin. I helped Eric with his college tuition, watched Jessica's kids while they were growing up, and supported them when times were tough. But now, it felt like they only called when they needed something. The love and gratitude I once felt from them had disappeared. It was as if I was just part of the background, fading into the distance. It wasn't unusual for me to buy a lottery ticket. I'd been doing it every week for 15 years, ever since Tom and I bought our first ticket on a whim. It was a ritual. I'd buy my Powerball ticket with the same numbers, Tom's birthday. A little piece of him, a little hope that maybe, just maybe, something exciting would happen. This particular Tuesday morning, I walked into Murphy's Corner store, the local shop down the street, as I always did. Helen Murphy, the owner, gave me a warm smile as she handed me my usual ticket. "Feeling lucky today, Carol?" she asked, grinning as she always did. I chuckled. "If I win, you'll be the first to know." I never really thought much of it. It was just something I did to pass the time, a little distraction from the routine of my life. Who really wins, right? But on the off chance that it ever happened, it would certainly be a nice surprise. 3 days later, I was sitting at home, sipping my coffee when the lottery numbers were announced. I checked the ticket, then checked it again. And again. My hands started shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. Every single number matched. I stared at the ticket in disbelief. I didn't know what to do at first. My mind was racing. I had just $1.50 million. I should have been thrilled, but instead I felt a strange emptiness. It wasn't the money that overwhelmed me. It was the idea of what it would mean for me. The freedom, yes, but also the inevitable expectations that would come with it. I wasn't even sure I wanted to tell anyone, not right away. I folded the ticket carefully and put it in my purse. I didn't call Eric, didn't tell Jessica. I didn't even feel like sharing this with anyone. Not yet. I realized then that I had an opportunity. If I kept this a secret, I could test something. I could see how my family really felt about me, not when I had something to offer, but when they thought I had nothing left. No money, no house, just me. That was when the idea hit me. I wasn't going to tell anyone, not yet. I wanted to see how far their love and support really went. If they truly cared for me, it wouldn't matter whether I had $50 million or $50 in the bank. The test had begun. The days following my decision to keep the lottery win a secret felt strangely surreal. I had the ticket in my purse, tucked away like a secret I couldn't tell anyone. My mind kept going back to my family, Eric, my son, and Jessica, his wife. I hadn't asked for help in years, but now I was curious. Would they offer it without me asking, or would they just see me as a problem, someone to avoid or manage? It wasn't long before the test began. My property tax bill arrived, and it was higher than I expected. Normally, I would have just tightened my belt, cut back on a few things, and paid it out of my monthly budget. But this time, I had another idea. Instead of paying it right away, I decided to call Eric and see how he would respond. "Hey, Eric," I said when he answered the phone, trying to sound casual. "I've got a little issue with the property taxes. They came in higher than usual, and I'm a bit short this month. Can I borrow $2,000 to cover the difference?" I heard him pause on the other end, and then his voice changed. "Mom, you're asking for money again? You can't keep doing this. You're living beyond your means. Maybe it's time to downsize like we talked about." I tried to hold back my frustration. "I'm not asking for a permanent solution. It's just for this month, just a loan." Eric's tone grew colder. "You're always in some kind of financial trouble. Maybe it's time to stop holding onto that big house. You've got to let go of it, Mom. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the place where I had raised them, where Tom and I had built a life. But to Eric, it was just a burden, a problem that needed to be solved. Just help me out this one time, Eric, I said quietly. Please, I'll pay you back next month. There was a long pause before he finally responded. Let me talk to Jessica about it. We'll get back to you. But I never heard back. 3 days passed in silence. No call, no message, nothing. I was left wondering if I had just imagined how close we once were, or if this was really how they saw me now, as a financial inconvenience. So I called Jessica. Maybe she would have a different reaction. Hi, Jessica, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to ask you for a favor. The property tax bill came in higher than expected. I need a loan for $2,000. Could you and Eric help me out just this one time? Jessica's response was immediate and just as cold. I'm not sure why you're always in financial trouble, Mom. We've talked about this before. You need to sell the house and move somewhere smaller. It's just too much for you. I could feel the sting of her words. I'm not asking you to solve my problems for me, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I just need a little help just for this month. Her voice softened, but it was the kind of softness that felt more like pity than care. You've been living beyond your means for years, Mom. Maybe this is a sign that it's time for you to make some real changes. It's not about us helping you out every time you need something. Maybe it's time to be realistic. I tried not to show how hurt I felt. I've managed just fine on my own for years, Jessica. I just need this one small favor. But she didn't offer any help. Instead, the conversation shifted to suggestions about how I should sell my house and move into one of those senior living communities where everything is taken care of for you. They had been talking about it for months, hinting at it subtly whenever I saw them. It was the same thing they always said when they wanted me to do something they thought was best for me. I hung up the phone, feeling a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I wasn't angry with them. I was just disappointed. They didn't see me, not the way I saw them. I was just an inconvenience to them, a problem to be solved. But I wasn't done. I had to see how far they'd go. If they cared, they would have helped, right? I didn't just want money. I wanted to see if they cared about me when they thought I had nothing to offer. Would they step up, or would they just walk away like they always did? I had the lottery ticket. I had the power to make my life what I wanted, and I wasn't going to let them decide what was best for me anymore. But first, I had to see what would happen next. Would they help, or would I have to take the next step alone? After the phone calls with Eric and Jessica, I sat in silence for a while. The sting of their indifference hung in the air. I felt like a failure, not because I had asked for help, but because I had been foolish enough to believe that my own children would treat me with the same love and respect I had always given them. But something shifted inside me then. I had been giving and giving for years, and now it was time for me to take something back, not from them, but for myself. I reached out to someone who had always been there for me, even when I wasn't expecting anything. Linda. She was an old friend from my nursing days, and we hadn't seen each other in years, but we kept in touch. We both lived busy lives, but somehow Linda always made time to check in on me. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Carol! Her voice was warm and familiar, and it immediately felt like a comforting hug. How are you? I almost broke down right then, but I held myself together. I'm okay, I said, my voice quiet. I just needed to talk to someone. I'm here, Carol. What's going on? She asked, concerned but patient. I told her everything about the lottery, about how I'd tried to ask Eric and Jessica for help, and how they had brushed me off, offering only criticism and suggestions about how I should downsize. I explained how I'd been left feeling like a burden, as if I was just taking up space in their lives. Linda listened carefully, never interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Carol, I'm so sorry," she said gently. "But I want you to know this. You're not a burden. You've given so much of yourself to others, and it's okay to take care of yourself now. You deserve to live a life that makes you happy. You don't have to justify your choices to anyone." Her words hit me like a wave of relief. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. I had spent so long caring for everyone else, putting their needs ahead of mine, that I had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. Linda continued, "You don't need their permission to live your life. If Florida is where you want to be, then go. You've earned the right to make your own decisions, Carol. You've already given everything you could." I hadn't realized it before, but Linda was right. I had given everything to my children, my family, and my friends, but now it was time to start thinking about myself. Time to do something that wasn't about fulfilling someone else's expectations. That night, I sat down and made a list of everything I needed to do. I didn't have to wait for Eric or Jessica's approval. This was my decision, and I had every right to make it. I could move to Florida. I could build a new life for myself on my own terms. The money from the lottery wasn't just a windfall, it was freedom. The freedom to live where I wanted, to do what I wanted, without anyone telling me I was too old or too dependent. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to move forward. The next morning, I called the real estate agent who had helped Linda find her new place in Florida. I was ready to make a move. I still hadn't told Eric or Jessica about the decision, but I was starting to feel the weight of the years of sacrifice lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just living for them anymore. I was finally living for me. It wasn't just about escaping New York or leaving behind a life that no longer served me. It was about reclaiming my own future. I was no longer going to be a passive participant in my own life. I was in control, and that was something I hadn't felt in years. I was going to Florida, and for the first time in a long while, I felt excited. For the first time, I felt like my life was really mine again. The decision had been made, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a surge of clarity. I wasn't waiting for Eric or Jessica to understand anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their approval. The past few weeks had been a test, and the results were clear. I had given everything to them for years, but now it was my turn to live for myself. I spent the next few days making arrangements. I called the real estate agent and set up a visit to the house in Florida. I started sorting through my things, packing up the few possessions that truly mattered. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for a new chapter of my life, one where I didn't have to answer to anyone. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. Florida had always been a dream. When Tom and I were younger, we talked about moving there after retirement. We'd visit the beach, wake up to the sound of the ocean, and live a simpler life. But life had a way of getting in the way of our plans, and we never made it. Now, the dream was still there, and it was mine to take, even if it was just me alone. I kept the lottery ticket hidden, tucked away in my purse. I wasn't ready to tell anyone about the win, not yet. The money was just the means to an end, the ticket to my freedom. But it wasn't the reason I was leaving. I was leaving because I had to. I was leaving because, for once, I wanted to make a choice based on what I needed, not what others expected from me. That afternoon, I called Eric. I hadn't spoken to him since our last conversation, but I knew this was inevitable. It was time to tell him what I was doing, even if I knew he wouldn't understand. "Eric," I said when he answered, "I'm moving to Florida." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could feel his confusion, his frustration, even before he spoke. "Florida, Mom, are you serious? You can't just pick up and leave like that. You're not thinking this through. You're 60 years old. You can't be making decisions like this." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I've thought it through, Eric. I've made up my mind. I'm going, and nothing is going to change that." "But Mom, you can't just leave us. What if something happens? You're too old to be going off on your own like this. You need to think about your health. Think about the grandkids. Think about your family," he said, his voice rising, his tone filled with that all-too-familiar concern that I knew wasn't about me, but about his own convenience. "I have thought about it, Eric," I replied, my voice steady, "and I'm making this decision for myself. I've spent my whole life putting everyone else first, and I'm done. It's my turn now." I could hear the silence on the other end of the line as he processed what I was saying. Finally, he spoke again, but this time his voice was softer, almost resigned. "I just don't understand, Mom. I wish you'd talk to me before you make such a big decision." "You've never really asked what I wanted, Eric," I said. "You've always just told me what I needed to do, but this time I'm doing what's right for me." I ended the call not long after that. There was nothing more to say. Eric wasn't going to change his mind, and frankly, I didn't expect him to. But that didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about him or Jessica. It was about me. And for once, I was standing firm in my own decision. Later that evening, Jessica called. I wasn't surprised. She had probably already heard from Eric, and I knew she would try to convince me to change my mind too. "Mom, we need to talk," she started, her voice all too familiar, that tone of authority I knew so well. "This isn't like you. Moving to Florida by yourself. What about the family? What about us?" "I've already made my decision, Jessica," I said calmly but with determination. "I'm going to Florida. I'm doing this for myself." She didn't even try to hide the disapproval in her voice. "Mom, you're throwing everything away. You don't even know anyone there. What if something happens? You can't just run away from your problems." "I'm not running away," I said firmly. "I'm moving on. I've spent my life taking care of everyone else. Now it's time for me to take care of me. I'm going to live my life on my terms." Jessica stayed quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, there was a hint of desperation. "I just want you to be safe. You can't make decisions like this without considering the consequences." "I've thought about the consequences," I replied, "and I'm okay with them. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you what I'm doing." I ended the call shortly after that, feeling a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was just free. I had made my decision, and for the first time in years, I was living for myself. The next few days were a whirlwind of finalizing the paperwork, making travel plans, and packing. I could feel the weight of the years of sacrifice lifting off my shoulders. I was finally doing something for me. I wasn't just getting by anymore. I was living. Florida wasn't just a destination. It was the start of something new, something that was mine, and I couldn't wait to begin. The decision was made, and the days leading up to my departure felt like a whirlwind. I had packed up the last of my things, finalized the arrangements with the real estate agent, and was ready to start a new life in Florida. But I knew there was one thing I still had to do: confront Eric and Jessica. I wasn't sure what kind of reaction to expect, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. They had their expectations, and they weren't going to like my decision. But I had already made up my mind, and no matter how hard the conversation was, I was going through with it. It was early in the morning when I received a call from Eric. I had been bracing myself for this moment, but I couldn't help the knot that formed in my stomach. "Mom," Eric said, his voice tight with urgency, "we need to talk. This can't wait any longer." I took a deep breath and steadied myself. "I'm listening," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You can't just go, Mom," he said, his words coming fast, almost pleading. "This is crazy. You're making a huge mistake, and I'm worried about you. You're not thinking clearly." I could hear the frustration in his voice, and it made something inside me tighten. It wasn't the first time I had been told I wasn't thinking clearly, but this time it felt different. This time, it felt like I wasn't just fighting for my independence, but fighting to be seen as capable, as a person who could make her own decisions. "I've thought about it, Eric. I've made up my mind," I said, trying to stay firm. "I'm moving to Florida. I'm doing this for me. I could hear his breath catch on the other end. But you're 60, Mom. You can't just pick up and leave like this. What if something happens? What about us? What about the grandkids? The guilt trip was familiar, but this time I wasn't falling for it. I've thought about everything, Eric. I'm not doing this because I don't love you. I'm doing it because I need to do something for myself. I've spent my life putting everyone else first. Now it's my turn. There was a long silence, and I could hear the frustration building in his voice. This isn't like you, Mom. You're not just thinking about the family, you're thinking about yourself. Don't you realize how selfish this is? I felt the sting of his words, but I refused to let it sway me. I've been living for everyone else for years. It's time for me to think about myself. I'm not being selfish, I'm being honest. I need this, Eric. He sighed heavily, and I could tell he was struggling. I just want what's best for you, he said, his voice quieter now, but I don't think this is it. I appreciate that, Eric, I said, my voice steady. But I've made up my mind. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I need to live my life, and I'm going to do it in a way that makes me happy. The call ended shortly after that, both of us still holding on to our positions, but I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. I had told him. I had said what I needed to say, and I had stood my ground. But I knew Jessica wouldn't let it go that easily. I wasn't surprised when she called me an hour later. Mom, what is going on? Eric told me you're really moving to Florida. Her voice was sharp, more concerned than I had ever heard it. You can't just make decisions like this without consulting us. What about the family? I don't need to consult you, Jessica, I said, my voice calm but firm. This is my life and I've made a decision. I'm moving to Florida. I'm doing this for me. You're being impulsive, Mom, she said, her voice rising. You're throwing everything away for some fantasy. What happens when you get there? Who will take care of you? What if you get sick? You can't just go off on your own like this. We're your family. We're supposed to help you. I took a deep breath. Jessica, I don't need to be taken care of. I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else. Now it's my turn. There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her tone had softened, but there was still a hint of frustration. I just don't understand why you can't stay with us or at least be closer. You're making a huge mistake. I'm not making a mistake, I said. I'm choosing my own path, and I'm asking you to respect that even if you don't understand it. The conversation ended with an awkward silence. I knew Jessica didn't approve, but at least I had finally said my piece. I wasn't going to change my mind, no matter how much they tried to control me or guilt me into staying. I sat down on the couch after hanging up the phone, a deep sense of peace washing over me. I had just taken the hardest step. I had made my decision and stood up for myself. I wasn't angry with them anymore. I wasn't hurt either. I just knew that I had to live my life for me. It was time for me to go. I had a new life to build in Florida, and for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future held. A few days later, I stood at the airport, staring at the departure gate with a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The phone calls, the confrontations, the doubts were all behind me now. I was on my way to Florida, where a new chapter of my life awaited. I wasn't running away from my family, but rather running towards something that I needed more than anything: independence, peace, and a sense of control over my own future. The plane ride felt surreal, like I was stepping into a different version of myself. When I landed and stepped off the plane, the warm Florida air wrapped around me like a promise. I wasn't just moving to a new place. I was beginning to live life on my own terms, free from the expectations and guilt that had tied me down for so long. As I drove to my new home, a modest house near the beach, I could already feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The beach, the sound of the waves crashing, and the sunshine, they were more than just scenery. They were symbols of the new life I had claimed for myself. I was no longer just someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's caretaker. I was Carol Adams, a woman who had finally chosen herself. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset over the ocean, I realized something profound. It wasn't the money or the house that made this new life possible. It was the decision to stop living for everyone else, to stop seeking approval, to stop being a pawn in someone else's game. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. I had made the right choice, not just for me, but for the person I was becoming. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of the rest of my life. In the end, the greatest gift I had given myself wasn't the house, the money, or even the freedom. It was the courage to live for myself, to make choices that were mine alone, and to finally embrace the life I deserved. The future was mine, and I was ready to embrace it.